Well, hi everybody. Welcome back to Bridges and Branches, and we're doing another episode of Days Gone By in our hometown of Fairmont, Minnesota. We're at a hobo park, and we had no idea this was here when we were growing up. They would have hopped off a railroad car and then come down here by the lake and made their camps. And they weren't bums, they weren't tramps. They were simply men who had fallen on hard times during the Depression, lost their farms, lost their jobs, had to ride the rails in order to find work and provide for themselves and their family. So where we are now is the intersection of Lake Sisseton to the south and George Lake to the north. And this is where the hobo camps would have been. Down here by the lakes where they could fish, find food. So this might have been the bridge that they rode on, hopped off the boxcar, came down here by the lake, and they would have made their way back here to wherever the campfire was back here in the trees. There wouldn't have been cars going by like this. They wouldn't have been able to hear each other talking quietly. Cooking their beans. In their tins. There's a guy on Facebook that recreates the life of a hobo. Talks about all the tips and hints of how they traveled so light and yet had everything they needed. Can you see the two hobos ahead of you there? One leaning against the tree there. Another right there. And they would have just kind of made their homes underneath the bridges, taken a little bit of a rest until they had to hop the next boxcar, try to find the next job. So this sign says, try to zoom in. The ravine area beyond this sign was the site of Fairmont's own Grand Central Station for the hobos, tramps, and bums who rode the rails looking for work during the 1920s, 30s, and on through the 50s. The Fairmont Hobo Camp was conveniently located on a major westbound rail line and may have sheltered over 10,000 hobos during these years. The Hobo Jungle, or Bum Camp, as some people called it, featured a secluded spot near town with good fishing in the channel and a freshwater artesian well bubbling up from the ground. An eyewitness from the early 1950s remembered the camp site with 5 or 6 men standing around, smoldering campfires, and 4 or 5 crude tin-roofed shelters thrown together using scrap lumber and cardboard. When it was time to move on, the men would make their way up the ravine's gently rising runway to track level, where they'd scoot out and hop on the freight cars. We mark this site in remembrance of the hobos who stopped here to rest and the people of Fairmont who helped them with odd jobs and food. They climb up there. Confession time. A couple weeks ago, I mentioned in the video that I'd lost some of the videos I'd pre-recorded. Parts of this hobo video were some of them, but the stories of the hobos are so interesting that I want to continue telling the story. I was able to find some pictures online from public domain sources, and if I couldn't find a picture, I enlisted the help of ChatGPT to create one for me, and I'll let you know when it's an illustration that was created by AI. So these next few pictures now are showing you some of the signs of the hobos that the hobos left in the way of communication for other hobos. They were chalk symbols that were left on houses or carved into trees or fence posts, and they signaled the safe spots for a meal or dangers like mean dogs. I mean, just imagine what their life was like from day to day, hopping trains, looking for work, sleeping in cardboard boxes, carrying their meager belongings in a bundle on a stick, constantly exposed to the weather and fear of being arrested and continually hungry. And so finding these signs, especially the ones that pointed them towards food and kind people, had to have been such a relief for them. The hobos followed an unwritten code: work if you can, share what you have, and move on. They had to survive on whatever they could scavenge or earn from odd jobs like chopping wood or painting barns or raking leaves, and they were forced to depend on the goodness of others. One such person who was especially good to the hobos in the Fairmont area was Agnes Johnson. Everybody called her Aggie. She was about 40 years old in the 1930s, and at dusk, every Tuesday and Friday, she baked 6 to 12 fruit or custard pies like apple, rhubarb, pumpkin, depending on the season, using surplus from her garden and neighbors' orchards. She placed the pies on a flat stump near what is now the Hobo Nature Trail and left a handwritten note that said, "For the boys on the road, God bless." Aggie did this for 6 years from about 1933 to 1939. Why? Because her own brother had ridden the rails after losing his farm in 1931. And Aggie told her children that no man would go hungry if she could help it. Local folklore and a book written by John Larson, who had interviewed the former hobos, tells the story of 14-year-old Tommy Olson, who jumped off a boxcar with a broken arm. This was in 1933. The locals wanted to send Tommy to an orphanage, but Pops Riley, a 68-year-old Irishman who'd been elected mayor of the hobos, stepped in and said, "Tommy stays with us." Tommy learned to fish one-handed and carved hobo signs, and by 1938 he was teaching new arrivals. He never left Fairmont, eventually becoming a mailman and marrying Aggie's niece. In 1935, a hobo named Kansas Red arrived late, and all the pies were gone. He carved a tiny pie into the pie stump and waited, and the next week Aggie left one extra pie, wrapped in a dish towel, with a note that said, "For the red-haired boy who waits." Red kept that towel in his bindle until World War II, when he mailed it back to Aggie from a Navy ship with a single word: "Thanks." Also in 1935, the hobo camp was down to 3 bullheads and a can of beans. A hobo named Preacher Joe an ex-Baptist minister from Iowa, stood on a stump and prayed, "Lord, send us a Christmas bird." An hour later, as a train was going through Fairmont, a freight car door slid open and out tumbled a crate, which broke upon impact with the ground and let loose a live turkey. The men chased it through the snow, and after catching it, brought it to Aggie, who cooked it for them. And so Preacher Joe's prayers were answered as the hobos ate turkey and pie that night. My research said that the people of Fairmont were wary of the hobos, but they were tolerant and sympathetic, and so they would leave food for them. Occasionally, the police had to clear the hobo camp if it grew to be too large or a theft was reported. In 1937, a hobo named Chicago Slim carved a rare symbol near the Hobo Trail that read, "Mean dog, hot stove, kind lady inside." A few weeks later, a new hobo followed that symbol to Aggie's back door, and so she fed him and bandaged some frostbite and sent him off with one of her pies, and 40 years later, Slim returned, now a minister, and preached at Aggie's funeral. I read that the Martin County Historical Society has a copy of John Larson's book with more of these stories, but unfortunately I was there in Fairmont on a day that the Historical Society was closed, so I encourage you guys to stop in there and take a peek around if you get the chance. So what eventually happened to the hobos? The camps began to fade in the early 1940s as World War II created factory jobs, railroads cracked down on riders, and federal relief programs such as the Civilian Conservation Corps and the Works Progress Administration offered alternatives by employing millions of people to construct public buildings and roads. The last train out of Fairmont was in 1942. On April 17th of 1942, only 5 hobos remained. They shared a final meal of 1 walleye, half a loaf of bread from Aggie, and coffee boiled in a tin can. Mayor Pops Riley stood and said, "The jungle's closing, time to go home or make one." They shook hands, climbed into an empty boxcar, and vanished west after carving one last message on a cottonwood tree. Fairmont Jungle, 1930 to 1942. We were here, we were hungry, we were brothers. So the hobos of Fairmont were a part of a larger American story, one of hardship and resilience and movement. They left few names and few photographs, but they did leave a legacy. I'm sitting a little above where the hobo camps would have been, but looking at the scene that they very likely would have looked at, with the railroad trestles and the water, and imagine the smell of campfires, hearing the murmur of their voices as they talked. Peaceful now, but I bet they were all quite worried back then. So I hope you enjoyed this. You can see that Hobo Park isn't just a space too.